Hey, it's Dave Lotan, Chairman of Aurion Resources, with Matti, the CEO of Aurion Resources. Aurion is a gold exploration and discovery company in Finland. We have partnerships with or investments from three major companies, Kinross, B2, and Newmont. We think Finland is the premier emerging gold district in the world, with the fantastic Ikkari discovery on our borderline, owned and operated by Rupert Resources, and with our fantastic Helmi discovery, owned in a joint venture with B2 Gold and Aurion and operated by B2. We also have sold discoveries on our Risti property in this district, which we think will rise to the top of the market in the next year or two.
Dave, thank you very much for that introduction. Matti, nice to have you on the call as well. I have been following from afar Aurion's progress over the years, but this is the first time I've actually had a chance to speak to you both. So I'm really looking forward to the next half an hour or so getting to know the company. Dave, if I could just start with you at the top level. I do want to get into the geology, into the project in Finland, but just at the top level, you've got these three relationships with the major companies. Could you, Kinross, B2 and Newmont, could you outline, and you've got that joint venture with B2. Could you outline the kind of the main way that you are related to those three companies, please?
Sure. Well, Aurion was a prospect generator, much like the company that you're involved with, Salazar in Ecuador. And during periods, during the bear market of, let's say, 2011 to 2015, Aurion relocated its exploration efforts from Mexico to Finland. It was a 5-cent stock at the time, and that's really not a cost of capital that's appropriate for drilling your own projects. So at the time, we pursued joint ventures as a matter of course, and arranged what's turned out to be serendipitous joint venture with B2 Gold, which contains this new Helmi discovery at the moment. Some very inexpensive surface sampling work yielded a magnificent discovery on our own property, which we call Aamurusko. Thousands of boulders averaging 25 grams over a kilometer by a kilometer and a half. The stock raced up to a couple of bucks. We got investments from Ross Beatty and Eric Sprott and some other luminaries in the business who I had previous relationships with. Rather than blowing our brains out drilling with that money, we took our time, and we had a bunch of majors out to site. And in a relatively competitive situation, we had Kinross invest for 10% of the company at about a $150 million valuation. Gold Corp was involved in that process and decided that they wanted to own 5% of the company, as they were permitted to under their NDA, and they bought that in the market. Kinross paid about $230 a share. I think Gold Corp paid about $275 a share. The Gold Corp stake has since been inherited by Newmont. We have attempted to buy it from them on one occasion, and they have let us know that they wanted to hold on to it. So, and also Newmont, prior to that, was coming to our site probably once a year to see what was going on in Finland. We had a bit of bad luck in the company. Well, some enormous bad luck. There was COVID that everyone experienced, but our founder, Mike Basha, lost his son in a tragic accident in 2019, which set us back for probably about a year. During that period, we ran some scout drill programs which weren't very fruitful, but we had second prize, which is Rupert made this fantastic Ikkari discovery, literally in places 50 meters from the border of our joint venture with B2 Gold. That's blossomed into 4 million ounces in only 36,000 meters of drilling in about 18 months. I'm sure it's getting bigger now, but this is the kind of discovery that juniors should be working to find. Incredibly efficient. The yield of ounces on drilling, the yield of NPV on drilling is going to be extremely high. Merlin, you've interviewed a bunch of these Abitibi companies that drill hundreds of thousands of meters without producing a resource, looking for narrow, high-grade targets. But what Rupert has shown us all is that even though we do have one of these beautiful Abitibi-like targets at Aamurusko, which is high grade and somewhat difficult, reluctant to reveal its charms, there are going to be these big fish swimming right under the surface as well. I mean, this is an area that has an incredible gold endowment, and it's just a question of finding where the traps are and where the most productive traps are. And that's the process we're engaged in now. We have the good luck of having the parallel development of our joint venture discovery, which is already made one of these discoveries. So we're working now to try to manage the company towards the ultimate value creation with a minimal amount of dilution along the way.
Thank you. Thank goodness, there's a lot to unpack in that. That was a very a full answer. So safe to say, it feels like Newmont is a kind of is passive shareholder, but there's an interested passive. So they're watching your progress. They've obviously got an eye on what Rupert have done, because that Rupert discovery is a phenomenal discovery. You've got this joint venture with B2. You've got a 30% share in that. Can you describe to me how that came about? And it's a huge land package, isn't it? Let's just can you just give me the commercial terms of that joint venture with B2? Matti, I promise you I will get to you, but let's just stick with the commercial terms of the B2 joint venture, please.
Sure. Well, we did that joint venture in 2015, which was an awful market. We still managed to get some payments for it, which have amounted to millions of dollars in B2 stock now. But essentially, they were able to earn 75% by spending $15 million and delivering a bankable feasibility study and arranging our share of the project debt. However, they also had the option to go just to 70%. And when they finally made the discovery, we were months away from the deadline to form the joint venture. They were probably 3 or 4 holes into it. Had they opted to go to 75%, the additional 5% would, we estimate, have cost them $50 million. And that would have been putting $1 billion value on the project after 4 or 5 fantastic discovery drill holes, but nonetheless only 4 or 5 holes. So they opted to stay at 70. We contribute to stay at 30. We had the good luck of having, let's say, $10 million in the bank when they made the discovery. And we had just raised another $17 million after that. Let's say 16. And so we were well able to contribute. We did consider, whether or not we should give them more of the project and try to get carried on it, but that would have been a complicated process, and it's one that's available to us at any time. But given we ended the year with, let's say, around $26 million in the bank, assuming a $3 million contribution this year, which is about what it's been or will be, we had plenty of money for that, and assuming that it's double that next year, which would be a $20 million budget for B2, that's already funded as well. And of course, in both cases, that leaves us with $7 to $9 million per year to work our own properties.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That's really crystal clear. So, Matti, could you just pull up the map, please? I think you've got a map there of the joint venture with B2 Gold, because I think this is a crucial point that you were talking about, Dave, about the difference between chasing a narrow vein, structurally controlled target, or a narrow, structurally controlled target, maybe in a vein, and a wider, thicker package through which you can build tons as long as the grade is there. So thank you, Matti. So I can see there you've got the B2 Gold joint venture in the purple acreage. Oh yeah, there we go. There's your mouse. And right next to each other, you can barely kind of space the 2 dots, are Helmi and Ikkari. Ikkari, of course, is the Rupert discovery. I'm good mates with both Tom and James there. So I keep up to date with what they're doing. And there is Helmi. Can you zoom in? You've got another map, haven't you, which is kind of closer in on that?
Yes,
Let's see where you get to.
Plenty of maps here. Hang on. This one.
That's the one. Yeah. Okay, so you've got structure running east-west, and those first drill holes. I mean, you've got a list of very impressive drill holes there down the left-hand side of the screen. Those are from 20. When were they made? Were they 2021 or they 2020?
And they were actually done in 2021 and 2022. So the first drill holes in this Helmi corridor on our side of the property, they were drilled in July last year, and we actually got the first results in October last year. So this is all very, very new, recent activities what we are doing here.
Fantastic.
Maybe, Matti, you can pull up a map that shows Kutuvuoma as well, just so Merlin can see the entire corridor.
Yeah, I think I've just been in your latest presentation, which is the kind of the September presentation, and it talks about the first program was 5,200 meters in 20 holes, and then you did another 6,500 meters in the winter, and you're just in the middle of a subsequent 10,000 meter program. On this map, I can see there's 7 kilometers between Kutuvuoma on the left and Helmi on the to the east. Can you kind of tell me where the drilling is going and what the plan is for this 17,000 meter drill program that you're doing at the moment? What are your aims from this program?
Okay, sure. So far, as you mentioned, we drilled last year about 5,000 meters, and during the first half of this year, 6,500 meters. Majority of those holes were drilled along the Helmi corridor, very close where we were testing the extent, strike extent of the mineralized zones there in the east-west trending corridor. And then we drilled a handful of scout holes you can see here on the northern part to the north from Helmi. So now we got positive results from both of these campaigns. The scout holes, half of those intercepted zones of gold mineralization in these new blind targets, and majority of the Helmi holes also hit a quite sizable gold mineralization and extended the footprint both along strike and with depth. And now the follow-up program, we actually have two rigs operating as we speak. So one rig is focusing on the Helmi trend. We are testing still the strike extensions. We are also testing the depth extensions with one rig, and the other rig is circulating with these new scout targets, or what we have been defined based on geophysical surveys and based on till surveys.
Thank you. Matti, the Rupert Resources model seems to be using geophysics as a key factor in searching for the favorable environments and understanding the geology, and then doing base of till surveys. How do you do your targeting? And I know that B2 are operating the exploration, but presumably there's a lot of input from your side as well. So is it a geophysics and a kind of base of till approach? And if not, what is your approach?
Yeah, so just a little bit background on the geology. So we are here on a Paleoproterozoic greenstone belt, which is very sizable, compared to Avidity Belt and some of the other favorable gold-bearing system in the world. And the one thing we have here in northern Finland, that the majority of the area is covered by overburden. We have quite complex till stratigraphy. It can be quite deep, anything between 2 and 30 meters. So we have very, very few outcrops in this area. So that means that the traditional ways of doing systematic exploration here are geophysics combined with till geochemistry. We can use heavy mineral sampling, we can use base of till sampling in order to define those zones that could be prospective for gold. And when you combine different data set from different geophysical surveys, then to these information, the till geochemistry, that is the main tool we use for targeting. So this approach has been used in the discovery process of, I would say, 99% of deposit or discoveries here in this part of the world. And that includes Kittilä mine, that includes the major discovery by Sakatti, and of course the same approach has been applied by Rupert. So yeah, there's nothing fancy in a way. It's systematic way, doing good science, and trying to be technically as efficient as possible.
And you showed Helmi on the same structure, the same east-west structure as Ikkari.
Yep.
Do you have the same geophysical signature? Do you have the same geology, or are there differences?
They look very similar. They are part of we have the major domain boundary, major thrust belt structure, which carries over 80 kilometers. Along that thrust belt, we have more than 40 occurrences of gold. We have the domain boundaries is between younger sedimentary domain and the older mafic and ultramafic domain. And Ikkari and Helmi, they are hosted by these mafic and ultramafic rocks, and they are like sisters and brothers. Some of the people, not just us, but some analysts who have first visited Ikkari and then came to see our rocks, or B2 Gold joint venture rocks, they say that okay, they look exactly the same. So we have the same stratigraphy, we have the same type of structures, we have the same mineralization style. And actually that does not apply just for Ikkari and Helmi, but along this trend, number of these orogenic gold deposits, they show the same characteristics.
And what took you to Kutuvuoma? Kind of 7 kilometers away. Was that again just kind of a ranked priority target? And what does that mean for the gap in between? You know, are you infilling that gap, or are these very separate, discrete structures? Because the distance from you to Kutuvuoma, or from Helmi to sorry, I get the name wrong. Kutuvuoma and to Ikkari, Helmi is much closer to Ikkari than it is to Kutuvuoma.
And don't worry, we try to pick as complicated names in Finnish as possible to help you guys. So I think they are part of the same system. We have the same major structure going through tens of kilometers. It joins actually Helmi, joins Ikkari, joins Kutuvuoma. The simple fact is that this area have not been explored for gold in a systematic way. And Kutuvuoma, actually, that's a historic prospect, historic in late 90s, it was discovered, and as a byproduct for base metal exploration. So initially it was a copper target, it was drilled a little bit, very, very limited amount of drilling, but even with that limited amount of drilling, we have a number of 100 plus gram meter intercepts there. And then it was just left. There's a tiny test pit as well. Actually, that was processed at Pahtavaara mill. And since then, there was no systematic exploration done until now, when we finally got the land package together, and we will be obviously testing the area between Helmi and Kutuvuoma. And I think there's a very good chance that there are other mineralization along the trend as well.
And just to clarify, Merlin, we bought Kutuvuoma from Dragon Mining. So Matti was with Dragon Mining when Aurion originally came to Finland, and Mike Basha bought Kutuvuoma, which at the time was a very small land package, in a tender process facing Matti in the transaction. We liked him enough that we wanted to have him on the board. At the time, Dragon owned or would own about 14% of our company based on the shares that we had given them. So this was deemed to be appropriate. And then Mike staked all this ground around it and dramatically increased the size of the land package. And so Kutuvuoma was already something you could see a resource in, but it looked small based on the work that was done. And the land package was too small. And then Mike was able to assemble a much larger land package around it and make his most important acquisition, which was Matti. So,
and was Kutuvuoma, was that based on an outcrop? Because I've seen that before as well. Because some of the older discoveries are outcrop based and a little bit of exposure, and then the covered discoveries are found later on.
Kutuvuoma was also covered based on the base of till and geophysics. And as I mentioned, it was part of the campaign that the state-driven companies and Geological Survey had in 70s, 80s, and 90s for base metal exploration. And that is actually a story for many of these historic prospects that we are now testing as well. That, you know, in 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, all exploration in Finland was controlled by the state. And it was only interested in base metals. So there was systematic geological work, both geophysics, mapping, and till sampling, but it wasn't even sampled for gold in most cases. However, that leads us now to this kind of like fantastic situation that we have reasonable background information that has never been applied for gold in a systematic way. So now we are benefiting from those tens of years of exploration by the state-driven companies, entities, and now using that on top of the modern techniques we can use now. So that helps us to define further targets for gold.
Thank you, Matti. That's a really comprehensive answer. Now, when I look at your market capitalization of 67 million Canadian, in a way, one can almost say that quite a lot of that is going to be backstopped by the discovery at Helmi. I know that there are no resource numbers out yet, but when you get consistent grade meter intersections like have been shown, it's very encouraging. It makes one think that this is going to be an economic deposit. It makes one think that this is heading towards something that's going to come out of the ground, unlike so much exploration around the world.
Especially if you can consider it as a co-development situation, Merlin, because of course Ikkari and Helmi are so close together, it's unlikely that there wouldn't be some cooperation between the separate business entities.
Okay, well, I'll park that thought. But the exploration strategy of a junior is different to that of a mid-tier company. So, your exploration strategy in your joint venture is being driven by B2 Gold. Do they have the same appetite to put an envelope around a resource as you do, or are they interested in continuing to prove up the area without necessarily putting a resource number on it?
Well, I believe that well, first of all, we are really, really happy to have B2 Gold as a partner, and it's been very, very close cooperation as well. We even share office spaces and accommodation in Sodankyland and work together on many aspects in this project, which is operated by B2 Gold. Now, when we consider that we find something quite significant or shows the potential to be something quite significant, it is beneficial to the joint venture, to both parties, to try to expand the envelope as quickly as possible, particularly considering what is happening on the other side of the property boundary. So we have been very pleased that B2 Gold has been active. They have allocated very good team. They have allocated sufficient funding as well. We actually the joint venture increased the exploration budget for this year by $3.5 million just a month ago. So the budget for this year is 13.5 million Canadian dollars. So it will give us 18,000 meters of drilling. And that's mostly going to Helmi, but we are also generating new targets. And so it's been very active, very, very good cooperation with B2 Gold. We try to move forward with the joint venture exploration program as quickly as we can and expand the mineral zone at Helmi. And actually, frankly, B2 Gold, I believe that this joint venture is their second biggest exploration budget in the world after West Africa and Mali. So that shows also the commitment that B2 Gold has for this area.
Fantastic, and it's a hell of a lot safer than operating in Finland than it is operating in Mali.
I think so too.
Fewer security risks and much less malaria. But the mosquitoes are quite bad in Finland, aren't they? Do you get and hassled by the mosquitoes? I guess you get that in Canada as well.
The Finnish Air Force.
Well, fortunately, our summer season is fairly short, so in the winter season there's no problem with mosquitoes.
Yeah, no problem with the mosquitoes. Now let's move on to your 100% properties, and we've been talking for probably half an hour on your joint venture properties, but let's not ignore your 100% held properties. I noticed that in your presentation you talk about the end of heli-supported drilling. Does that also refer to Does that also refer to the joint venture properties? Are you truck mounted? Are you road supported? I mean, how is the exploration carried out on both the joint venture and on the 100% held properties?
We are using only track mounted rigs nowadays. The only area where we had to use helicopter supported drilling was the Aamurusko, the initial high grade discovery, because the good drilling orientation was achieved only by taking the rig up to the rugged hill, and that limited our ability to drill efficiently, both from technical and from capital point of view, particularly for several years. But now we've been able to solve that one as well, so we don't need to use helicopter supported drilling anymore, anywhere.
Great. Now, my idiot's understanding, my ignorant approach to understanding Aurion was that you had made these incredible discoveries in the boulders, and there was lots and lots of high grade, but the first round of drilling or the next phase of exploration afterwards didn't consolidate the source material. Matti, can you explain the thinking around the geological approach and how you've tackled the exploration in recent years at Risti and Aamurusko?
Sure, and may I share one slide here? It's probably
please, yeah, let's go for it.
Easier to explain. So let me start with this one, just to give you a little bit background on Mike Pasha, a fantastic geologist, fantastic prospector. When Mike and his team came to Finland, they simply walked the ground. They did really, really good mapping and prospecting in the areas that we have outcrops. And here on the left side, you can see, the samples Mike and the team collected. There are all 8,500 samples, averaging about 6 grams per ton gold on average. That's a fantastic discovery just by walking on surface. And actually that shows how underexplored or unexplored this area is as a whole. And obviously where we can do the mapping, we need to have suitable rocks that are on surface. And in this case, we would have these silica-rich sediments, which are resistant to erosion, and you can actually find from surface. So this was the really, really intriguing discovery Mike did here at the center at Aamurusko. And I will jump into Aamurusko just shortly, but I'll tie this together with the regional work we are doing. And this actually outlines the the targeting for joint venture as well, and what we are doing. So now, as I mentioned, Mike did fantastic work on the prospecting mapping wherever we can do that. Now, we are complementing this work and using these ideas combined with the ideas we get from Helmi, from Kutuvuoma, from Ikkari, and we are moving also to the other side of the domain boundaries, into mafic and ultramafic rocks. These are all covered by overburden, so you don't find anything from surface. So that's why you can see that, where we have gaps, white areas here on the map on the left, those areas we are now targeting and testing with geophysics and base of till. What is really encouraging now, that we see that we have gold on both sides of these structures, what we have interpreted here. The initial discoveries Mike and the team did, they were all here in the sedimentary basin, because that's where the indications led based on these boulders what we have. But now we've seen that Helmi-Ikkari-Kutuvuoma, Kaarselkä historic occurrence right here, that we actually have gold also on the mafic and ultramafic side. So as long as we are close to the domain boundaries, major structures, we have prospectivity on both sides of those. And of course, if we just think about which is the most prospective host for gold, then mafic and ultramafic rocks, we tend to get more consistent zones of mineralization, more wider zones of mineralization. So it's kind of like Helmi and Ikkari style compared to these super high grade systems in silica-rich sediments, where they act in a more brittle way. We do get nuggety gold. We still have fantastic amount of gold, but it just takes more drilling and more work to define the tonnage and create the statistical satisfied way. So we are combining the approaches here on what the work was done a couple of years ago and what we are doing now. Sorry, that was a long.
And thank you. No. That's really fantastic, because clearly in the silica-rich sediments, fluid flow is confined to a few fractures, and that's where you get the high grade, because it's all being channeled through a very, very narrow fissures and fractures, which means that it's got limited opportunities to kind of to penetrate the bulk of the rock mass, and also presumably because it's silica rich, it's less reactive. It's relatively inert or neutral host rock, and so even though you get fluid flow, you might not get the precipitation. But if you can find the ultramafic areas, which have got a much better permeability and probably porosity, and they're probably slightly more reactive, that's where you're going to get the disseminated or the thicker intersections of mineralization, especially when they're associated with the same plumbing system with the same fracturing.
So I'd add, Merlin, that we do have the beginnings of what would make a resource at Aamurusko. The problem is the opportunities were all down plunge and would have required drilling through increasingly large intervals of dead rock, or potentially dead rock, in order to grow it. So we attempted to grow it laterally, but before we looked for more shoots coming to surface, we needed to do away with helicopters. And we're only very early in that process now. So there's now lateral development opportunities rather than opportunities to depth, but it's taken us really a year and a half to get to that stage.
When you talk about lateral opportunities at Aamurusko, are you talking about laterally into the ultramafics? And have you managed to identify targets in the ultramafics that you will be progressing to the drilling stage?
Yes, we are. And let me try to share another slide. It's so much easier to show something than try to explain, particularly with my broken English. This one is actually part of the reply to your earlier question that how wide the system is at Aamurusko and what we've been drilling there. So this is a pseudo long section where you can see that we have a few pockets of areas where we have more drilling, and we have lots of high grade results along these trends. And actually the scale of many these like high grade shoots or potential start of the high-grade shoots that extend way in the depth. These are in the same scale that we've seen in many of the Canadian examples as well. The high-grade shoots within these brittle rocks, quite often the strike extent is no more than 100 to 200 meters each, but they have quite often quite good depth continuation. Now, what we have recently identified is this, that when we drilled from top of the hill here through a package of sedimentary rocks, we actually identified that we don't have just one structure, but we actually have at least two. So we have sedimentary rocks in contact with mafic rocks. We have a gabbroic unit where we have sheared beautiful altered system with arsenic and gold. Then we go into again the silica-rich sediments, and this is the zone where we had the initial high-grade discoveries over strike length of more than 1 kilometer. But now, when we drilled into the gabbro a little bit deeper, we started to see beautiful alteration, shearing, veining, arsenopyrite and gold also within the gabbro side. And so this is the domain boundary I was telling about earlier. We have the domain boundary on the other side, we have the sedimentary rocks, and on the other side we have mafic and volcan, ultramafic rocks. And now this is kind of like clear evidence that the same structures go through all these lithologies. And now we are drilling as we speak, and one of the targets for the second half of this year is testing the extensions of these structures, gold-bearing structures within the neighboring lithoids here in gabbro, in mafic and ultramafic rocks.
You've got the domain boundary, you've got the high grade in the sediments, and you're on the edge of your Aamurusko system. And is that the reason why you're moving continuing the drilling into the ultramafics, or is it just because you're in a kind of a good environment, or is there something special you can see in these ultramafics that you can't see in other places?
Well, there are There are a couple of things that we've seen in these matrix rocks. Last year, when we started to drill test this area, and this year, the first thing I'd like to point out is that we have these gabbroid intrusions, and a number of those. And as you know, fortunately in Kalgoorlie, the majority of the gold there is hosted by these gabbroic diorite intrusions or sills, which are rather wide, 150 to 250 meters wide, and wide enough that you have fractionation process within these sill bodies, and that the fractionation then provides another really good physical trap in addition to the chemical trap you already have in the mafic rocks. And we've seen similar features also in some of the gabbroic sills what we have in this area. So that's one of the things that we wish to test and target. So that's kind of like the optimum target for gold to precipitate, where you have kind of like mafic rock which cracks easily and breaks into pieces. The other thing we are targeting, not just in Aamurusko, but a little bit further in the south, we are looking at higher strain ductile deformation zones, which are quite extensive. We are close to this major crustal scale break, as I mentioned, and then we have second and third order structures, splays from the main structure. And when we look at the mentioned Kutuvuoma and Helmi discoveries, they are mainly within highly deformed, highly ductilely deformed package of mafic, ultramafic, and graphite-bearing schists, close to either basalts or close to gabbroid bodies. So we are targeting those areas as well along the domain boundaries, where we have identified both structural features interpreted from the geophysics, but also we do have geochemical indication. We have anomalous gold, anomalous pathfinders along those trends as well. So we think that those are high priority targets as well.
Excellent. That, and me being a geologist, I love that answer. Just to make it, just to bring it back out of the geological rabbit hole, can you just summarize what the exploration program is for the next 6 months in terms of meters drilled, and how much is going into the Aamurusko area and how much is going into the wider Risti project?
We are drilling approximately 1,300 meters per month, and it's an open-ended program. We keep on drilling at least until the end of this year. I would say half of that meters will go to Aamurusko area, and the other half, then we will start scout drill testing these target areas, as we discussed, just based on geophysics and geochemical anomalies. And actually, we keep on.
So it's 1,300 meters per month, at least until the end of the year. Is that right? So you've got 4 months. So you're looking at about 5,200 meters as the program, or have you?
Yes,
when did you start?
That is correct. We started just a few weeks ago, but we have a drill contract which is open-ended, so we will keep on drilling longer than that.
And I think it's important to add, Merlin, that we're going to alternate between drilling higher probability areas, which are closer to Aamurusko, where we would hope to find Ikkari-style mineralization in the adjacent volcanic suite, and then lower probability targets, which could be entirely something new. And one of the other reasons that we're doing that is that it's taking a very long time for assays to arrive these days. Still, unfortunately, the after effects of COVID and sample prep is actually the bottleneck. So we will test an area, wait for the assays to arrive to determine whether or not it needs further investigation or which direction to go in, while we're off testing other areas, and generally alternate between higher probability opportunities close to Aamurusko and potentially home run opportunities further away from Aamurusko, and finding something entirely new.
Well, gentlemen, thank you both so much for talking me through the projects and the company. I've learnt a vast amount in a very short space of time, and I hope that the viewers will get the same learnings and the same experience. And best of luck with the ongoing exploration. I look forward to seeing the results as they come out in the months ahead.
Thank you, Merlin, very much.
Many thanks, Merlin.
And a final thought when I hear about Mike Basher and his the tragic death of his son in an accident, I just think there are reasons to be thankful in this life, and health and family are pretty much up there at the top of the tree.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, absolutely.